Welcome to San Francisco. I am a global Scot. I'm one of roughly 600 folks around the world who probably have a Scottish last name. Mine is McAfee. And Alex Salmon got a hold of me a couple years ago and said renewable energy could be a future industry for Scotland. And so it's my understanding about 25% of the wind and tidal energy in all of Europe is held by a little dinky country called Scotland. And so Alex asked me to sign on, and I went to the castle there in Edinburgh, and they brought in 30 fife and drum, and they blew my ears off. Those guys are so loud, it's unbelievable. And we had a nice fancy dinner, and I got appointed as a global Scot. One of the roles of a global Scot is to wander around the world and see opportunities for Scottish business. And today I have a special privilege of meeting some young Scottish entrepreneurs through this program, so I congratulate the folks who have put a lot of their life into making this happen. To tell you the truth, those might be a relatively small event. It's not about the size, it's about the impact. And you guys are the point of an arrow that really is a remarkable evolution of the Scottish economy. Scotland is a tremendously educated population, tremendous industrial, chemical, and other attributes, and largely non-existent from the point of view of the United States and Silicon Valley in specifics. So I congratulate you on flying over here, surviving the jet lag, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot. I went to Harvard Business School for a little project called the Private Equity and Venture Capital Program. And there's a Harvard Business School professor who had an explanation for what an entrepreneur is that I think is particularly important for you to understand if you intend to be an entrepreneur. A manager allocates resources that you already control. Here's your budget, it's $1 million, here's your 100 people that work for you, go make this year as efficient as possible. What's an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur allocates resources they do not currently control. That, by the way, is very scary to managers. When you go to a manager and you say, all right, here's the plan, we're going to triple sales, we don't have the money yet, we don't have the people yet, we don't even have the product yet, but let's go do it. What's the manager say? He says, I can't do that, I don't have the resources. What's an entrepreneur say? I know a wealthy guy, he's got the cash, I know some buddies from school, they're the employees, the product, well, it's in my head, that's good enough. Yeah, we're going to get it done. That's an entrepreneur. Scotland has a cultural problem. Not everybody has it. You probably don't have it. What's the cultural problem? They violate Henry Ford, the automaker's quotation where he said, failure is an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. Failure is an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. If I said that in Scotland, most people that funded me would say, no, failure means you don't get funded again. In Silicon Valley, failure means, you know what, I got to know you, you're pretty credible, you return emails, you actually do what you say you're going to do. Yeah, the market didn't work, the product didn't work, customer didn't like it, and frankly, we fired you, but I'll fund you on your next deal. That's Silicon Valley. I invite you to see the differences between those two, and quite frankly, be part of changing the culture of Scottish investment, Scottish markets, and Scottish everything else. Why? Because anybody here over the age of 50? No, you're 28. Okay. Anybody over the age of 40? Okay. 20 years ago, any 40-year-old was basically in college 20 years ago. You know, 20 years ago was 1995. The internet really didn't exist in 1995 as a commercial enterprise. So for most of the people in this world, you assume the internet's kind of the way the world is. It's not. I funded 25 companies. I founded 7 companies that I've taken public. I've raised $85 million from Bill Gates. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars on Wall Street. And you know what? Most people are not like you. Most people remember the world without an internet. The topic that they asked me to talk about today is how to raise money from VCs, and frankly, what are VCs looking for? The first and most important thing we're looking for is that brilliant little spark of inspiration that says this brand new, newfangled thing called the internet, which is still at a very young stage, even though all you people think it's been around forever, it's not, has little areas that have not been discovered yet. I was just talking to a guy that's got a mobile app concept. It's obvious. Everybody should do it. But They've been so busy just getting photos onto your websites called Facebook, they haven't gotten around to doing it yet. Little obvious things are diamonds that investors are looking for. So as you're thinking about stuff and you're taking notes on my topic, the first thing to do is get away from your error of thinking that all the bright ideas have already happened and that the real smart people in Silicon Valley have already thought about it and already executed on it. Your number one job in life is to do what your overall mission in life is, which is create value. And I would ask you as an entrepreneur to sit down and say, I don't have any money. I don't have any programmers. I don't have whatever I'm going to do this product. But what does the world really need me to do? I grew up as a farm boy, about 50 miles east of here. There's a mile square chunk of land where my 4 brothers and I threw dirt clods at each other and ran around the ditches when we were kids. I grew up poor. We're called land poor. Your balance sheet says millions of dollars. Your cash flow statement says no cash. Typical farmer. That is the best way to start as an entrepreneur. Why? Because everything is up. You can't screw up if you have nowhere to go down, right? I didn't have any preconceived notions of, oh my gosh, I've got a big fancy degree, so if I'm not at least working for some big multinational company, I'm a failure. Nah, anything was a success. I had only one thing to bring in life, and it's the same thing you do, which was, what can I do that is going to be uniquely valuable for the world? My first technology company I founded when I was 29 years old. And I'd done 6 leverage buyouts starting when I was in high school and then college and then down in LA with some big investment guys. But I'd ran into two folks, a lot like you. And in 1982, they had a little thing, looked like about the size of a business card, that was a new standard called the Personal Computer Memory Card International Association Standard, PCMCIA, and they're exactly this size. In 1992, the concept of a laptop was still taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. Are you really going to be able to take that computer and walk around with it? I'm not so sure. The concept of putting a little card into the slot in the side of it was outrageous. You stick something in, it's going to blow up your battery, it's going to blow up the operating system, it's going to confuse the software, it's never going to work. So what happened? I found 2 engineers who'd spent 2 years in their apartment working on the software. So when you put this card in, it didn't blow your computer up. We had no money, so I put in $100. Each of them put in $100. We raised $300, not 300 million, $300. We then went, we had no office, we had nothing. We went around town and we said, who can make us one of those little circuit boards just because they like us and think we're smart people? And we found an Asian dude who said, you know, it's a great idea. You'll probably never pay me back, but I'll make you some of those. We loaded our software on it. We went over to a $1 billion computer distributor called Bell Microproducts, $1 billion of revenue. And we said, we have something that the whole world needs. We have our software that allows you to put this in your computer. It doesn't blow the computer up. And they said, yeah, but nobody can do it. And we said, we can do it. Stick it in your computer. Fortunately, their computer did not blow up. So they bought $30,000 of these little things, which we had no money. We'd gotten the vendor to build it. We gave it to the customer. What did we have then? You guys are in business, know what we had. We had a $1 billion company that owes 30 grand. I called up Silicon Valley Bank. I said, the $1 billion company owes me 30 grand. Will you lend me any money? They said, sure, we'll give you 80% of it. The $1 billion company is going to pay us in a month. What did I do to my vendor? I was his #1 quickest paying customer. We came back 10 days later, paid him the whole thing off, and he said, shoot, I thought I was going to lose all my money. Now you guys are paying me in 10 days. How much credit you need? We did $8 million in sales in the first 12 months on $300 of equity. But the first thing I told you was find something the world really needs you to do and do it. What was it? The world really needed some software guys who had some hardware competence, who could really put stuff in the little card and really sell it. Our customers were Compaq Computer, Toshiba Computer, AT&T, which at the time was in mobile. All the guys had mobile computers, needed something to stick in that slot. And so we put their logo on it, and within 36 months after putting in $300, we were doing $48 million a year of revenue, had 150 employees, had built a 25,000 square foot semiconductor manufacturing facility from scratch, and had a $165 million valuation, and 3 investment banking firms wanted to do an IPO for the company. We'd done $8 million, $25 million, $48 million. We were running at $65 million revenue. That was when I was 29 years old and I had $100. That was my first public company. In 2000, in the United States, we had a disaster. It was the meltdown of NASDAQ. I personally lost $130 million in the process. It didn't take everything I got, but it woke me up. It said, oh, I should notice. In 2001, California said, we have dirty air. And if we can clean up our air, we'll have a healthier population. And you know what? There's only one thing we could do to really clean our air up quickly, and that is the stuff you put in diesel engines and gasoline engines throws crud in the air. It's called smog. Been to LA, especially 10 years ago, you would have recognized it. And so we adopted a mandate. And we said, we're going to eventually be 10% that's not this stuff that goes in the air. My background in producing anything that had anything to do with the engines was exactly somewhere between 0 and a negative number. But do the math. There's 13 billion gallons of gasoline in California. 10% of that's 1.3 billion gallons. Multiply that times $3 a gallon. It's about a $4 billion industry coming from 0. So how many competitors did I have that were entrepreneurs at that time? The same number that equaled my competence level. 0. That's exactly what you want an entrepreneur to do, is wake up and say, I'm just as stupid as everybody in this room, but I'm going to work harder and I'm going to move faster. I founded a company. I went out and I optioned some real estate. I took it public by saying we're going to build some biofuels plants. Bill Gates, 4 months later, after I took it public in a merger, gave us $85 million at a $250 million valuation. 12 months later, I raised $150 million at a billion valuation. And 6 months after that, it was worth $2 billion. Name of the company is Pacific Ethanol. It did $900 million in revenue last year. It made $35 million of positive cash flow in the first quarter of this year. Is the largest producer and marketer of biofuels in the Western U.S. And, I'm proud of this, has 200 million gallons of capacity. It cost us $570 million to build it. I founded that company because I said, some idiot's going to come along and actually do that. I might as well be that guy. I'm currently the chairman and CEO of a company I took on a NASDAQ a month ago. I founded it 8 years ago. It's called Aemetis. Do not buy the stock. I will not give you inside information, but I never tell anybody to buy stock in our companies. It's all for institutions. We do all this stuff for the guys that are managing $100 billion. The things you ought to invest in are the startups that have no revenues and no people. Aemetis currently has a $250 million market cap, doing about $10 million a quarter in positive cash flow. What is it? It is a biofuels company that solved the problem in diesel. It said, the Europeans needed a cleaner diesel, let's go do diesel. Now, I cited a couple of my 7 public companies, but hopefully what I've done is engendered in you the concept, you don't have to have any money, you don't have to have any team, you don't have to have squat, except for you've got to be willing to allocate resources that you currently do not control. And if you can, in your mind, figure out what those resources are and focus on bringing them together with what you're going to create for the world as your unique contribution, you're done. You're successful. I don't care if you ever make any money. I don't even care if you're ever funded. You're doing what the world needs you to do. And too many people that I work with come to me, and all they're trying to do is make money. How boring is that? I want to have people that say, I'm desperate to solve a global problem, and when I solve it, it's going to be massively valuable to people. That is the beginning of creating a lot of value. I think I've got about 5 minutes left or so of questions. Are there any questions or comments? I have some closing comments in a second, but yes, ma'am.
So I heard about all your successes. Have you had any failures?
Never failed, because Henry Ford was right. Every failure was an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. I would say honestly, I've never failed. I've actually personally always made money, and even the companies that didn't make as much money as I would like. But that's because I'm an early investor, and so it's kind of hard to go down from low numbers. The failures, and this isn't something for startups to worry about, but something to pay attention to. The real world is run on commercial lending. It's on debt. What you guys do has no assets, has no nobody will lend you money. But when you get to run a real business, your partner is the commercial bank. About every 5 or 6 years, those guys screw up terribly. You don't want to be a victim of their screw up. You know, the mortgage crisis was a bunch of bankers losing confidence in each other, and so they threw the entire industry of mortgage banking sideways, and that's what they should have done. No, they screwed up everybody. They canceled business lines of credit and personal. When the bank screws up, the one thing I would tell you in my old age, of 51 years old, is that is your number one risk, is that commercial banker calling you up like they did in November 2008 and says, we're calling all your lines of credit, you have 4 hours to pay. 4 hours. I had $80 million in my personal assets in one of these accounts, and they said, we're going to start flushing the account. I said, well, what's the credit line for your buy? Oh, it's $1 million. Oh, well, back up. How much do I have in your account? 80 million. How much you want? $1 million. How long do I have to pay? 4 hours. November 2008, there were bankers jumping off buildings. They were so panicky. You don't want to be the victim of that. It cost me $11 million to pay that dude, by the way. I lost $11 million. That's what I could have sold the asset for 6 months later because that jerk called me and I'd pay him $1 million. Please do not repeat that mistake yourself. I made the mistake of thinking they would act competently and they didn't. So I'm sorry for haranguing on her commercial banks. That's my experience. Sam.
So you've got a lot of interest in the production of energy, be it solar. Do you think you'll ever move into logistics like national grid superconductors or slightly more large-scale investments?
Currently, I'm small-scale investments. I'm doing $500 million at a time right now. Large-scale, and I did a $1.3 billion solar project, largest in the history of California at the time. And I'm personally about trying to take small amounts of capital and making them into massive amounts of capital, not take massive amounts and make them slightly bigger. And there's an industry called private equity that's about taking massive amounts of capital and making it slightly bigger and then take a big management fee for doing that. There's a whole industry for doing that, and they use debt and everything else. I personally find that less interesting because it doesn't require any innovation. All you're doing is taking a balance sheet and then putting more debt on it and then paying it off through a sale. So the answer to your question is, I love the energy industry. Scotland will be one of the world's leaders in tidal energy. You have 25-foot tides, offshore wind off the east side. The Queen's got a whole bunch of stuff that you guys could do business with. And I would like to see you guys go in and say, look, I'm going to build a wind farm or tidal farm or I don't care. Build anything. Make it capital intensive. That means you have a lot of collateral. And then go demand that the commercial banks and the pension plans are pressured by the government to fund you. You should get cheap debt. It should be 3 or 4% interest rate debt, 50 years to repay, because that's how long the asset will produce. You know, titles don't stop after 50 years. And you guys should have the cheapest cost of capital in the whole world. Alex Salmond is a nationalist. So just go and say, look, if you want to have a country that's going to run like a country, you got to start shoving cash in here. And I'm the guy to get the cash, and you want to get it for me. So I would have a serious discussion with Alex. You call him Alex, don't you? Or
on good days.
Mr. Solomon.
I'm wondering, in suppose 2 minutes he takes to explain you the idea, and that is definitely a unique idea, massively impacts the world. What are those 2 or 3 questions you would ask after validating that?
The first thing I would recommend, since I do get many people who want to talk about their business, is have a presentation that when you read it would tell you everything you need to know about your business, if you're raising money, what you're raising, anything you think would be relevant, because you really can't get it out in what is known as the elevator pitch. You really can't in 5 minutes tell me or anybody else something significant, but you can in 5 minutes say, hi, my name's Joe, I'm going to send you a presentation, love for you to respond. And I can say, terrific. Last night I was up at 4:30 in the morning. I happen to run the largest biofuels production facility in all of Asia. I built the plant, and I've got 50 employees over there. And they, for some reason, can't read the clock and see that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon their time is 2:30 in the morning my time. So anyway, if you're not willing, too bothered with sleep, then running an India plant just is great. But at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was responding to people out of Europe and otherwise who will send me stuff and say, what do you think? And most venture capitalists will give you a response. Most of them will say, we don't have an appetite in this area. What he's really saying is, dumbest idea ever. Some of them will say, very interesting, you ought to talk to these 2 guys. Other ones will say, get in here, I want to hear all about it. I have been a venture capitalist for a couple decades. The probability of being funded by a traditional VC is somewhere close to 1 out of 1,000. 1 out of 1,000. And, I was just quoting this, more than 50% of those companies completely fail. About 80% of them don't actually achieve their goals. So if you're a statistician, multiply 0.2 or divide 0.2 into 1 out of 1,000. That's your probability of a successful personal outcome in a VC deal. So I'm not very encouraging about VCs. VCs have to be competing against another market, another capital market. And so if I was going to do an elevator pitch, I would say, I went to business school. My buddy was Mr. Lakshmi Ambani, who's worth $32 billion in India. I'm planning to meet with him in the next month to tell him about my idea. I thought I'd run it by you first. Now your VC friend's saying, no, whoa, slow down. What's this thing? You don't want the Ambanis. Who wants the Ambanis? You say, well, he's my buddy. He really wants to fund my deal. But I'll let you look at it. You have to create a competitive environment, even if it doesn't exist. Even, call somebody, and name's Lakshmi. Just say, hi, I know Lakshmi. And, oh, by the way, I saw the Ambanis in the newspaper yesterday. It's close enough. You've got to own your ability to raise the money, and I would encourage you to be aggressive about that. Let me wrap up with a quick comment. I am a very old man at 51 years old. I founded my first company when I was a teenager, and my brothers and I were in need of starting a business because we were $2 million in debt at age 14. How we got there is a book somewhere, but we had inherited some land, and a business deal went bad that my dad had done, and we ended up with the debt. I must tell you that helped me more than entrepreneurship than anything I've done. Because when you start $2 million in debt and you're a friggin' teenager, you have to work harder. I worked 3 part-time jobs all the way through college because I didn't have any money to pay for college. I was paying for 4 law firms to represent me in the litigation. I fought that litigation for 10 friggin' years. All the way through the company, I told you, started it, 150 employees. I had lawyers working for me suing people, trying to protect myself from getting flushed. That is wonderful. If I had a Harvard MBA or Stanford MBA guy, and I've got a whole bunch of them work for me, who came to me and said, Eric, I really want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to be just a successful guy. I want to be an entrepreneur. I'd say, good. Let's start out by putting you all the way into debt, and then number 2, let's make it so you can't work for anybody because you can't make enough money. When you owe $2 million to somebody, you just can't make enough money off salary to ever pay it back. It forces you to think, what's the big thing I could do? The really big thing. I love people like the WhatsApp guy who used to collect food stamps at an office of the government just a few blocks from his business he just sold for $19 billion. He came here with no money. That guy is perfect. He has nothing to lose, and he's got everything to gain, and he's going to work his butt off to do it. I would encourage you to take the Scottish lack of appetite for risk and say, that's interesting, but irrelevant. What is relevant is, what can Scotland do for the world? What can you do for the world? That's a relevant question. Whether you succeed or fail no longer is an issue because you will succeed by the fact that you tried. Thank you.